Partick? Not going as far as Partick, Hen. How about city centre? George Square? Hielanman's umbrella? Right. Hoppin' Hen. Actually, I'm just on my way to Sammy Dow's, Mitchell Lane. Aye, going to meet a few of Bud Neill's old friends. Maybe get together. Bud Neill, the man who invented Lobey Dosser. Lobey Dosser. Bud Neill also invented rank badging. Bud Neill, the man who wanted to license budgies. Says if he did that, Knightswood could pay off the national debt in 6 weeks. Oh, hey there, my love. That's you, Hen. Oh, G.I.Bride, Ned. Time for curd. Time for curd. Aye, mate. Time for curd. Pass up! Pass up! Oh, yeah!
It was very interesting going through Glasgow in the middle of the day, around about noon, because there were huge queues at street corners where there was a paper boy, and they were queuing up to get the next instalment of Lobey Dosser. He just took over the entire city.
I was born up a penned in a single-ending Glasgow about 21 years ago. A fine strapping when I was too, a wee smasher.
Mrs. Dosser's had another one, a wee boy. Poor soul, that's our routine. I'll just call you Lobey, son. I've run out of names. And you have to bide with your Auntie Mabel, for there's no room for you here. You know, wee man. And mine entire great water regular. Snip, snip, sob.
My Auntie Mabel had a small holding out about Springburn, an old cow, some hens, and a wee pony.
Ah, hello, so you're real Lobey. Come on in and wash the dishes.
Nuts to this. I'll run away tonight and get a job as a sailor. So, next day at Plantation Quay. Only chance a job as a sailor, Mac. What age are you? 6 weeks. Aye, mate. Come aboard.
I was force-fed Lobey Dosser by my father.
Yeah?
Who force-fed me many things. Brussels sprouts as well. But this, my father was a huge fan of Lobey Dosser. And he bought the Lobey Dosser books, those long books, and he would say, read that, he said. But I was always confused with Lobey Dosser. I can't even pretend. Why? To be honest, because it was too adult for me. I never said, Partick. I still don't. I never saw Partick. Is it my own town with a question? The wee G.I.Bride. That's another thing.
What?
The G.I.Bride. I should say, what's a G.I.Bride? I'm like, what's a G.I.Bride?
Get ready.
Partick.
My wife and I still go, perfect, you know. Terry's got it perfect. The G.I.Bride were in the veins. And these running joke and it was on for months, and folk actually picked up and we started talking like Bud Neill, you know.
This was the biggest confusion of all. Riding through Callan Creek here, there's a cactus that's a V sign like that. Now, I find it funny now. Now, I understood V signs because I was a wee Glasgow boy. We were always doing this to people. People passing on buses, you know, it was my hobby. But these guys riding past the V sign cactus, they say, "And you." What does that mean? And you. It says a lot about Glasgow upbringing. I understood that. But I didn't understand. And you? I never. Can you imagine in Partick, somebody goes, "Yeah, you." And you go, "And you." You never dream of it. Go, You did it right. You did something equally bad. I never understood what rank badge is. See, rank had gone out as an expression when I was in it.
Yeah.
Oh, he's a rank badge, and nobody would have said that. And then my father explained what a Lobey Dosser was.
Yeah.
I said, what's Lobey Dosser? And he said it was a guy who, because of the means test, the number of wage earners in a house, it was a bit like the poll tax. Right. And people had to escape the house not to be counted among the wage earners as the money came into the family. So they would sleep in the lobby. It was the lobby in a tenement building, which there was about 3 houses off this long wooden floored lobby. I remember playing cards in the lobby in a tenement in Partick. And they would sleep in this lobby with the drafts.
This is pure Bud Neill, isn't it, Ruth? I mean, we're not allowed in the pub. We've
Standing
got
outside,
watching the waves.
tied up with the waves.
Right,
Exactly.
yes, well, they're getting tanked up. You know,
And the window
one,
thing.
the window hang.
Yes,
Right.
Mrs. Thompson opening the official tune. He had window
That's
hanging.
right.
Yeah.
When you doing a Julie piece, son?
Yeah, all of that.
Mrs. Thompson's just been doing it the fruiterers peeling cabbages, haven't you, Mrs. T? If there's one thing Mrs. Thompson is, it's optimistic. Isn't it, Mrs. T?
I like all the Mrs. Thompson series. You know, Mrs. Thompson, who has a ubiquitous opinion, except she never actually speaks. There's always somebody saying, Mrs. Thompson's going to tell you about her operation anytime, aren't you, Mrs. Thompson? But Mrs. Thompson doesn't actually speak.
You'll no catch me going to nae moon, Mrs. Thompson. No, even if it was the last place on earth. And there's Mrs. Thompson as a fine slip of a lassie, if you can hardly credit it. There's a lot to say, there's a lot to be said for no saying a lot.
Well, Amelia, you tell me that you actually knew Bud Neill.
I actually did, George.
That's
yes.
pretty good. How about telling me a thing or two about the man himself?
Well, I remember him when he was a boy.
Mm-hmm.
He came into the Glasgow School of Art, escorted by somebody who was a wee ginger-haired boy.
Mm-hmm. Was he invited in, or did he get into in false pretenses?
No, he got some introduction to a chap called Hugh Adam Crawford.
Oh, yeah.
You heard of him?
Yeah, very famous.
Head of drawing and painting.
Man, yeah.
And my mentor in the School of Art.
Yeah.
Crawford came over and asked me if I'd take this young man from the Gorbals,
Yeah.
which surprises me, he said the Gorbals, under my wing and teach him something about drawing, because nobody would talk to him. They snubbed him.
Get away.
My fellow students.
Away.
Yes. He was pale, tiny, thin-faced. He could disappear if you saw him sideways.
I was just looking when we wrote normally sort of show the students' record cards, but I couldn't resist but look to see if within the school we had Bud's record card, and indeed we have. And he did pretty well. Now, I'm not going to say what they are because that's still covered by the official secrets act. But it says he was born 4/4/1911, and he came to the school in September 1927. Neil William Ravelston Prune. So that was pretty posh.
And a lot of people think, oh, Bud Neill's a Glaswegian. Anybody would have to come from a sort of working class, grassroots background to be able to write on this level and to be able to understand these people as well as he does. Well, the complete opposite.
This is often the case. Immigrants are often more wildly patriotic and enthusiastic about local customs and traditions than people who have spent generations there and they're used to them. It's just ordinary.
Take it for granted, yeah.
Aye. But Glasgow has a something, and that something spoke to Bud, and he spoke back to it and brandished it and gave it life and permanence. Good old Bud.
You know his devotion to a cowboy called William S. Hart.
And I hear it's true that Bud Neill actually used to be a cinema musician.
Bud was very conscious of this, the American tie. In his youth, had fallen in love with Western movies and rank badging and sheriffs and goodies and outlaws and so on. And that very Glasgow, very west of Scotland, attachment to America is one of the things that infuses Lobey Dosser.
Absolutely, yeah.
I doubt very much if anybody, any child now, ever plays cowboys and Indians. I doubt if anybody has in the last 20, 30 years. We certainly did. It was all cowboys and Indians. And Bud Neill, of course, was obsessed with this sort of stuff. We used to go and often see these ridiculous films in places like the Callan cinema, what else? And see the same films he must have seen himself 20 years before me. All he did was a simple thing. He just translated it into Glasgow. And in fact, Glasgow's full of cowboys anyway, and full of Indians. My favourite Indian of all time has got to be Pawnee Mary of Argyll. Well, that's just great, isn't it?
That squaw the chief sent out for the fish suppers, who would she be? Probably Pawnee Mary of Argyll. Fine.
Actually, to be honest with you, I prefer rank badging. I always got the curious impression that Lobey Dosser was a bit of a cheat. I don't think he lived in Callan at all. I think he lived in some douce-wee place like White Craigs or something like that. But rank badging was definitely one of our sort. He might have gone to a fee-paying school. I've always had a suspicion about that as well. But he was definitely a chap from Callan, which is indeed where I came from myself.
Come on, Colin, enough of this film noir. Let's see the real thing.
Got to get out of that. What are you doing with that hat on?
It's my Alan Ladd look.
Oh,
Not that bad, Colin. I was only a wee boy at the time. A trusting child. And there I was, reading my Lobey Dosser strip. 2 cowboys in a bar. One says to the other, "See his 2 glasses of lemonade, because there's lots of wee Waynes reading this strip." Nothing.
right.
Stunned. Ever since then, I've had no trust in fiction. Fiction was never the same again. My life was ruined.
I was born around the turn of the century, the youngest son of a poor Glasgow wood chopper who lived in a clearing in the forest and made utility wardrobes. One afternoon, I was minding my own business when a whacking great log fell on my head. Everything went black. In real life, my father ranged the world as a chemical company director, pictured here on a day off buying cyanide minerals at Los Jacos, Mexico. He was a crack shot, and few back home could outshoot him among this posse of the 1st Dunbarton Rifle Volunteers. Help, senor! A wicked heel bandit is robbing the bank.
Come on, Elfie. I had no gun, but I rushed in and closed with the desperado just the same. The Mexicans was that pleased that they made me their sheriff.
Quickly, senor, the leader, Cortes Pantona Nail, is escapado, which is pretty tough Mexicano.
Oh, keep ahead, Pedro.
Unlike my brother Arnold, I was no scholar. He was the ducks, I was the dud. I hated school. There was nothing I was good at except doodling in the margin of my jotters, which used to get highly recommended. At that time, I was harboring a secret desire to be a cowboy. William S. Hart was appearing every Saturday at our local cinema, and we played along. 5 of us formed a cinema band for ½ a crown a show. I figured that a life on the rolling prairie would suit me just fine. My father could see by then that I was burning with ambition to live off him for the rest of my life. He pointed out that there was not much of a living to be made as a cowpuncher in Troon. Since scribbling wee men was about the only thing I showed any aptitude for, he suggested the Glasgow School of Art for a year or two, sort of putting the comic art before the horse.
That young Neil was a right funny bloke. He did nothing but draw horses and motorbikes all night.
With World War looming, my father merged his company with ICI and emigrated with us all to Canada. The Wild West beckoned. I upped and left. I ran away from home. I had just turned 27. I was the oldest runaway of them all. I toured the States and dreamed success in comic strips. In this wish-fulfillment cartoon of 1941, which he modestly signs as Rembrandt, Bud surrounds himself with newspaper moguls, drawn in the American cartoon style he so admires.
My paper told me to offer him a blank.
We pay him $50,000 to draw a straight line for the telegram on Mondays and Fridays.
He's terrific.
They offer the dashing artist a bewildering series of lucrative but really quite daft offers.
King Features, Willie. They say to go right ahead with those parallel lines at $1,000 a pair. But
the glam gal is Mary, his future wife. There is no record of Hitler having panicked when he heard that 1556507 Gunner Neill had joined the Fighters for Freedom. So many of the boys, including me, were discharged unfit from the 54th 18th Light Ack on Scapa Flow that the battery soon became known as the King's Own Duodenal Ulcers.
That bus driver must have been blind if he didn't see me. I was shining my torch right in his face.
He was working as a bus driver at the time.
That's right.
And there was a lot of complaints about them going by the stops and one thing. It was a blackout. I mean, you couldn't see a damn thing. I mean, you know,
Right.
And of course, obviously, most bus drivers weren't articulate enough to really put a response in. But obviously, he was, and he wrote this lengthy and quite kind of pithy reply to all these complaints. So they investigated. They couldn't believe this was a bus driver had written this. It was so articulate. So they sent a reporter out to check it out, and sure enough, he was. And they asked him. Obviously, there'd be a scarcity of writers. Because most of them would be at the front. One thing, in 1943. And they asked him, would you like to do a couple of bits and pieces for the paper?
Right.
And he then mentioned, he said, I can draw a wee bit. And he was quite a kind of humble man in that sense. I can draw a wee bit. So they had a look at his drawings, and that was him. He was signed up.
He told me that there was a cartoon strip around at that time, and the real sort of dumb bum character in here was a guy called Bud, and he was lampooned by everybody else in the strip. So his brother ended up calling him Bud. It just shows you the sort of the guy he held the old man in. But anyway, so he picked it up. When he had to come up with a pen name, he just thought, well, hang on, it used to be called Bud by my brother, so that's where it came from.
I'd be fair ashamed lying in my bed at 9 o'clock in the day and all Joe up and washed and shaved and out bashing Hitler.
Bud's early work was based on American cartoon styles rather than European, and it took him a few years to develop his own style. He found that he had a good lug for the patter and a rare E for the line.
Then, as if things wasn't bad enough already, the blooming war has to go and finish.
Pilfering of the country's food stocks has now reached alarming proportions.
3 delightful novel ways of serving dinner tonight and a suggestion for a dainty high tea. Raw mince. The eye looks awful sere.
For whom the bell tolls and tolls and tolls and tolls.
Here's the cord coming, Ruth.
Will you just fling yourself in front of it?
I dream of Jeannie with the light brown hair, one inside and 2 up the stair. Botanic Gardens, fair stage. If that object comes under the category of dug, you can't take it up the stair. You deaf? I said the car's flip and flop. Glasgow's about the only city in Britain where you'll see a tram car bashing about in its wild state.
The tram cars you do, they're not accurate drawings of Glasgow tram cars, but somehow or another, the whole nature of the Glasgow persona was put into the tram car, and with a few lines, He had made it that wonderful cartoon of the tram at the car terminus. And the Clippy, inevitably, a great Glasgow character, saying to the driver, "OK, Tommy."
Okie dokie, Tommy. Off we go into the wild blue yonder.
And the tram car is a Glasgow tram car. Its whole personality is sort of sharp, squat, aggressive, yet cuddly.
Quiet the day. I wish a cheeky wee man would come on with 6 dugs, smoke downstairs and spit in the flare. These a jug of something diabolical, Hen, of a date with a Yank. Well, there's one thing about the noon sun. You'll not be pestered with buffalo stampeding. I love all the ones about when the Yanks, obviously, when the Yanks came to the noon, you know, and all. But it's that lovely one when there's an American sailor standing at a bus stop. They subs. You know if he trouble with Dan? See her? He wants to take her down to 50 fathoms and shove her out the funnel. She's loyal, I'll say that for her. She's held on to him all winter.
The words, they are of course in the patois, and wonderfully distorted patois. But you've only got to do the simplest of translations. Just simply transpose it into English. It becomes almost no curve in its elegance.
Yaffa yak. Put yak yaffa. Line's awfully bad. I can't make out if he's got a week off, or a week off.
All these lovely Glasgow words, you know, they're all purpose words like Zatno, you know, Zatno diabolical.
No. No E for April. E for after.
See, they've snow nice. Snow nice. Terrible busy this way with him. He's the bloke that sticks you and stick doon to unstick stuck stanks. My, but I like red hair. Red hair's rare.
He drew immaculately. He chose his words immaculately with a curious kind of precision. And yet, all of this exuded a kind of confidence, but he was one of the most unconfident people I ever met in my life. Eddie Boyd and I was running a radio program. Eddie wrote with me for the program every week in life. And Bud was there occasionally, drop in, and moseyed in is a word for Bud Neill.
One of his funniest cartoons was during the war. There was a big riot down in Irvine. The Poles, there were a hell of a lot of Poles down there, stationed there. And a drawing which was perfect. You know the way they used to wear these long coats in the ground. And they all carried briefcases.
Poor Stanislaus got mixed up in that Irvine affair and had to have 6 stitches inserted in his briefcase.
The curious thing about these cartoons, there's so many women in them, but you couldn't actually say he was very fond of them, could you? Or could you?
Well, actually, I think he does like women, actually. I know it appears as though...
So why are they all wee battles?
Well, but it's to show the men that they're really male chauvinists. I mean, the women that I carry, the bags when they're going down the coast, you know, yeah.
You can't get a Carey, son. Your mother fell up.
Toothbrush, son, shoes, sunglasses, bikini, bail money. About time we were getting ashore. We've been blethering long enough. Well? Oh, relax! That's 5 times you've sailed round me. What do you think I am, Mac? The wee Cumbry? Don't splash the sea about, Hen. You're no wanting your mammy head up for losin' summer, are you?
Water. Just one wee sip. What's Elfie? My wee lassie full. Ah, a vulture's shaddy. I'll no give in. I'll have another wee crawl and see if I can find water. The old vulture's going to eat me. By this time, Dosser bones will have been picked clean by vultures. Exhausted, the intrepid sheriff calmly awaits the end, while high overhead a vulture flutters. If vulture flutter. Ah! A lunge! It's surely not true. It can't be right. It's still there. That's right enough. A water hole! Saved!
Back in the saddle, Sheriff Lobey Dosser giddy-ups El Fideldo, wee Elfie, his faithful two-legged steed.
I've no idea where we are, Elfie. Do we're lost.
One of the courts a reader at one stage who had been complaining that he'd got the sex wrong, that it should have been La Fidelda, El Fideldo. But he just said, no, it's my horse and I'm going to call it what I like.
Notice, several educated types have written informing me that as Lobey's horse is female, a wee lassie foal, her name in Neil Spanish should be La Fidelda. To these educated types, I would point out that it's my horse. And anyway, Elfie's mum and dad wanted a wee boy. Bud revelled in his creation. He even dressed as Lobey to ride the range of Carlton Cricket in Newton Mearns. He fired at rank badging at the Kelvin Hall. His comic strip became a cult. Workmates were now nicknamed Lobey, Badgin, or from his ever-extending cast of characters, Rubberlugs, Funny Bears, Stark Staring, Fitz a Coffin, or Big Chief Toffee Teeth. Oh, now, brown cow, modified.
What do you think of it so far, Mrs. Thompson?
Mrs. Thompson, what you near did with this morning? It's a kind of rheumatica sciatica in my lumbago. Talk about murder. The palms of my feet's got slit discs next.
She's one of the hypochondriacs.
Enjoys off a bad health. It's his teeth, off he crab it, like a bear with no fags. Off a clever Wayne, miss. Say, a one failure heed that you learnt after Budgie Hen.
I adore
the
Wayne. Nay,
that Wayne.
That Wayne, I adore the baby. I mean, it looks like every wee old man or every wee old woman you've ever seen. The hat is brilliant, isn't it? And
all of it's brilliant. And also the mammy, I mean, going into the psycho repair shop.
Wants to know if you can mend a blow on her Wayne's dummy.
I mean, that's just a beautiful. That's all surreal. He's got a very kind of surreal mind, and the surreal mind allied to the Glasgow language.
Well, no bother bath me the night, son. Your mammy'll just do you with the dishes. Great how the years slip in. Another 3 weeks and I'll be 10 months. No peace for the wicked. Well, what are you sitting doing to be up to now? Drink your milk, or you'll no grow up to be a lazy, shiftless old layboot like your daddy. What a shocking report, Cab. It's a good job for you that your father can't read.
You know, his manner towards the children was very good. He had a wee peephole in the studio, and if you looked through it and you saw the artist at work, you got a prize. But I went to see him with my daughter, and he lifted the chair and he lifted her up to look through, you see. And when she got up, he ran away around and jumped up on his desk, you know, and she was shouting, "Oh, Bud, I can see you, you know. So, can you see me yet? I can see you." And he came back in, and he had a wee box with the prizes in it, which was a biro, it's a cheap biro pen, you know. But on it said, "From Bud Neill, the funniest man since Rasputin."
I'm 3 ounce, 12 pound and 18 stone.
He did lovely wee fat women, usually seen from the back. They were somebody's mother. They seemed all, they would be somebody's granny today, but they were all somebody's mother with those wee fat coats with the shoes at the bottom, the headscarf. And the Waynes, the one I remember best, the Waynes are all at a zoo, and they're pestering a wolf in a cage. They're jabbing it with things. And the woman saying, "Stay away from that wolf. There's a touch of the Alsatian in there."
Or two wee men, one standing with another man with a dog in the lead, and he says, "What's a dog's that?" He says, "A chow. Chow the leg off you as soon as look at you."
That's your dog.
I'm trying to get him out of doing that. Tiny attention. He's getting a terrible show out. He's a kind of small miniature of some breed of wee dogs. Tiny attention. He only snaps if you think you're frightened of him.
It works with words as well, and that's the thing that I love about these cartoons, is the fact that they are two separate art forms, if you like, which come together to form a third, and that the drawings and the words, the caption, can exist simultaneously. My favourite Bud Neill cartoon, for example, is the one with the sign that says Speirs Road, and there's the guy with the hair and the quill, and the inkwell is on there, and he's got the scroll, and he's writing in there, and the woman's leaning over, almost from the edge of the cartoon. She's leaning over, and the caption is, "What's that? You're a poet, are you, son? That's nice. You got a rare day for it." And this kind of non sequitur that he seemed to collect them. I think that's a lovely drawing.
Yeah, what is it? Just a lump of black ink and a wee bit of paper, and yet it sums the whole story up.
So he uses it. It's that touch down there where he's blowing that to give it a bit of shadow, and just the blobs of white paint that he's obviously put on there just to highlight it.
And straight out, no corrections, no nothing.
These are drawn exactly to size. That is the size that they would be. They wouldn't need to be reduced. He didn't draw big and had to be trimmed down. This one here, don't move. It will go away once it's stung you. It's this, look, it's the mouth.
Look at movement there.
Yeah. This one is gorgeous. I'll take your hammer-headed sharp Mac. I've got a couple of nails to thump in a dresser. The scampi, the live scampi, scampering, I like to think.
Each day Bud would prepare a batch of pocket cartoons for Tom Ingle, the Evening Times editor, for him to select one appropriate for that day. Around about the 1952, the art gallery had just bought a Salvador Dali painting for £8,200, and there was a big stooshy kicked up about it. Bud's response was a typically pithy and unpublishable cartoon.
Tom Ingle said, "Well, what have you got for us today, Bud?" And Bud handed over this cartoon, and old Tom burst out laughing. And then he said, "Oh, can you use that? Can you use that, Bud?" And put it down, and Bud picked it up and opened it. And it was one of Bud's inimitable wee men looking up this Dali thing. And it's a marvellous copy made of the Dali painting. And the wee man was looking at it, and instead of which Bud had put in £8,000, the little man was looking at it saying, £8,000? Christ! Yeah.
My favourite showed this character. You know, the guy's a footballer, and he's getting slammed back with this whiz, and his whole face is indented in, and it's spot the ball. And no large cash prizes will be offered, you know, and just the guy's face is
shape of the
concave.
One of the ones I like is the one with it's over the Callan or something like that. And the wee guy's up there, and he's got his brothel creepers on, and the wee lady, it's the last dance, the last ball. The wee lady's underneath his chin, tucked underneath his chin, and he's gliding around the dance floor. And he's giving it the chat-up line. His chat line is, "No kidding, I seen you the minute I saw you."
Come on, we'll save our lawyer. Hear a box saying, "Miss Teddy Boys is neat, clean, and well-mannered." Here comes Andy the maestro. He can play power chords.
I'm no jiving this one, Mac. I've just new regained my poise.
Rugged. That's what I am. Just plain, dead, rugged. Bang him one with your coiffure, Tommy. Tommy is an individualist.
Is that no dreary? My flippin' booffin's boofed. Who do you think he was whistling after, I hope?
If I was to wear that, my knees would have a nervous breakdown.
It's very funny when you're buying all this garb, this paraphernalia of the 60s, all the new clothes and styles, and you come home and he'd be absolutely aghast. He'd stand there and berate you about this new outfit you had on, and it was really quite comical because the guy that's talking to you had a Levi's, cowboy boots, and old T-shirt on.
I was the first guy that I'd ever seen with a crew cut in real life, you know.
It's kind of the John Wayne of Dunfermline.
Yeah. And, you know, must have been one of the first guys to wear blue jeans I ever saw.
Yes.
Levi's.
And he always reminded me as if he might be a security man for the President of the United States. He was dark shade, he was doing a bit angular, and his jaw kind of jutting, looking from side to side. Almost as if he's maybe looking for trouble, you know.
Jim Connolly, the son, of course, was quite taken by my father, because my father, you see, was a bit of a hippie. We were kids in the 60s. I mean, this was the Rolling Stones and the Beatles and whatever.
You know, I think he had actually a certain amount of sympathy with the fact that I was maybe the black sheep of the family, you know, and he wanted to nurture that side of things, and he may have been instrumental in me deciding to take up a career in music, you know.
Music and art, yeah.
Aye.
Mighty fine, mighty fine. One jujube left, and I had a hell quarter when I started telling them my story. Wains can fairly wire into the sweeties. Right enough. Carr says, Lobey Dosser and his dossy. I must flee. But wait, I have another nefarious plan which you can help.
And another thing about the Frank Badger, he was always saying nefarious. To plan more nefarious deeds. When you're a 10-year-old in Partick, it's a bit hard.
No, I think he's not Scottish. Frank Badgen is actually English. He's
Well,
a Victorian Englishman.
I thought it was posh West End Scottish. West End Glasgow.
Who said perfect?
Oh, yeah, perfect. And over there.
The one I like best is at some stage Frank Badgen, this incredible upper-class Englishman, turns around, takes off his black hat, puts on a tartan bonnet and says, I'm away to Hampden.
The preacher and I are going to Hampden. He will marry us on Monday.
I would get mixed up in a strip like this.
Also, it does remind you of Victorian melodrama, but just of popular theatre and pantomime all the way through. You're aware of this kind of thing. And he obviously drew on things like that.
Yes.
And part of the effect, when Fairy Enough appears, he speaks in verse just as the Fairy would appear in the pantomime.
My plan is rare. It's just a job, eh? I found a way to safeguard Lobey.
You are a very clever fairy.
Hooray, hooray. Just call me Fay.
I love you, Fay. Will you do me the honour of becoming my wife?
Oh, dearest Rid, I love you too. Our marriage you will never rue. I'll keep your burrow clean and neat and give you lovely food to eat.
Ladies of Carlton Creek are agog with news of the big wedding.
I don't know what's up with me. 1 minute my breath is beat and the next I'm agog. I'm agog, Tay. I'm agogger than one he is. She's aye the same, has to be the agogist. Hooray, hurrah! My bridal gown is very, very swanky. 'Twas made by seamstress Lulu Bell from out a silken hanky. Oh, then nice. So look a wee treat.
If you were to play in a Bud Neill opera or a Bud Neill musical or Bud Neill play, is there any character that you would really enjoy doing? I have one in mind for you, but...
For me, who do you have in mind?
Oh, the Hollywood film star. Oh, Gold.
Oh, Gold.
Hart O'Gold.
Howdy, Sheriff. My name's O'Gold. Hart O'Gold. Where's your Stuart Granger now?
Well, looking back over these, you know, from the perspective of the 1990s, I was struck by how rooted it was in the popular culture of the time. References for example, Big Bill Campbell, which was a big radio show in the post-war period. And you know that phrase, mighty fine, that keeps coming back.
Sure.
That's one of Bill Campbell's phrases. He kept saying this on the radio all the time.
Absolutely, yes. And all sorts of other historical
pieces. Actually locates in relation to particular American politics mostly.
The growing menace of communism arouses the House of Representatives Un-American Activities Committee.
So he talks at one stage about ringing up the White House to talk to Harry, or the Harry Truman.
Not a word of this plutonium to anyone, Miss Speirs. Always been mobbed by foreign agents and other bad types.
My lips are sealed, Mr. O'Gold.
Every particle of plutonium will be transported tonight to the secret atomic pile at 1374 15th Avenue, Washington, D.C. 2 up, knock twice, and ask for Harry. Another 46 Al, and we're through. As dawn streaks the eastern skyline, a big air freighter roars down on Washington, D.C. Here we are. I'll just land outside the Treasury Department and get somebody to humph in the plutonium. Out the road, you with a lum hat. Honestly, they pedestrians. Hello, Mac. My name's Dosser, Sheriff of Calton Creek. I've a lot of plutonium for you and 6 desperate foreign agents locked up in a wee cupboard. Gee, that's great. The Committee on Un-American Activities is proud of you, so help yourself to a medal. Now, take 2.
They say this atomic energy is going to revolutionise everything. Everybody with an aeroplane apiece and maybe a wee roast at the weekends. Well, for to let you understand, with a clean H-bomb would all be blew up in nice tidy wee bits. To get a sight of the jets at all, you've to look for you can find or no be.
At the same time, this is incredible, I mean, I would call it Joycean use of language. And just wild flights of language. Remember one in particular, they've got rank badging up in court.
You're arraigned before this year court to answer for your heinous crimes against society. Heinous? Yeah, they make the big Venus. Order! Order!
My father at that time was he was a bit of a prankster. He was always pulling stunts on the neighbours. We moved into Dunfermline, and that was fascinating. It was a great town to live in. Loved being brought up there, but the whole thing reeked of conservatism. And the houses were all nicely named, very proper, and so he then proceeded to call the house Dim View, much to the alarm of everybody. We were totally taken aback by this. And he'd do things to have a little bit of fun with the locals, but they generally didn't take very much to it. Unfortunately, I think our immediate next door neighbour, Jim Condy, I think he was singled out for cruel and unusual punishment on quite a number of occasions.
For the first few years, in fact, when that Bud stayed in Dunfermline, they got on quite well, you know, but, you know, I mean, they stayed at arm's length pretty well, but, you know, they got on quite well. And then there was a really unfortunate incident because Mary came up to the door and was hammering on the door. And quick, Bud's trying to kill himself, you know, he's locked himself in the garage. He's turned the car engine on. And, you know, my dad went rushing out and rushed round to the garage, hammering on the door. But, go away, I've had enough, you know. And eventually my dad had to break the garage door down with an axe and dragged Bud out half conscious out there. He was drunk, of course, as well, you know.
A guy doesn't come home at 4 o'clock in the afternoon with all these kids running all over the park and the place full up of neighbours, etc., and attempt to do himself away in his own garage. I mean, if he's going to do it with any sense, he's going to do it up the road, far from the madding crowd, so to speak. So I really think it was a cry for help. My father had a terrible problem with booze for many a long year. At the end, it nearly destroyed him. He was drinking bottles of scotch a day. He quite literally couldn't function any longer. His work had fallen apart, although he could quite literally sort of summon energy and go up to his studio and do about 2 weeks' work. But it really was beginning to tear him apart. So he then realised that he had enormous financial problems because he spent all his money. And of course, his physical and mental health caused by this alcohol had really destroyed the guy. But then he came back, got off the booze. In the last 10 years, he was booze-free. He bought a parrot for my mother. It was an Amazon parrot, the most beautiful animal, and his name was Albert. He was a great character. He used to talk, he used to laugh. He was a vibrant bird. My father and him got on extremely well, and he got a special cage made for him. I think it was made by the Blind Society, this enormous cage. I remember it was called the Albert Hilton. It used to have a sign on the top, the Albert Hilton.
Pretty jockey would be obliged if you'd put him back in his flippin' cage.
He had a thing about budgies as well, didn't he? Because remember the other one that, I'm just trying to remember now, at the time they did the Lobey Dosser statue, they were asking for reminiscences, and somebody wrote to the Herald saying that there was a cartoon about hairdressers, and he couldn't remember anything about the cartoon or the punchline. All he could remember was a wee sign on the wall that said, Budgies repaired.
Joe's went out for his dinner. Only message.
I think one of my favourite ones is the man lying in his bed, you know, sound asleep, and the wife waking him up, and at the door it's a black door and just 2 eyes. Oh, Tommy! Wake up! There's a man here lost his budgie.
Have a wee rummy about and see if the budgie's in there.
We had a very bizarre tabloid newspaper type story in the mid-60s when firemen were actually called to a fire in the wood mill area of Dunfermline and revived a budgie with oxygen. And 2 days later, Bud actually gave me this cartoon with a reference to budgie burn lotion, which I thought was lovely. The caption on this, in fact, is right up to my ears rolled by the usual seasonal rush of singed dogs.
But he was an awkward customer.
Oh, yes.
And I'm told that they fell out with the Daily Record because they were clipping away at his cartoons. And he joined the Express, or came to the Express. He didn't like the Express. I think it stood for things that he intensely disliked. But anyway, it was the last refuge. And I think, in fact, he ended his days drawing for the Scottish Daily Express.
Mm-hmm.
I remember it well. He wrote that he'd fallen down a big hole and he landed in the Express. And when I asked him about that, he said to me that, well, that's what happens to all of us, you know. Eventually, that's the fate that awaits you, is that you'll fall down a big hole and you'll land in the Express.
I think there must be so much of the archive is just lost. Yeah. I believe much of it was actually thrown out when the Daily Express abandoned Scotland in 1974. A lot of it was just bin-bagged and thrown out.
And one of his poems is the Nits Hill Nature Notes. And it said, a funna deed spjug, a skinny wee thing with nae feathers on it and only one wing. It had fell from its nest in the guttern above. Aye, and likely its mother had give it a shove. A realist.
Perishing poem. Winter came, the snow has fell. We Josie's noses froses well. We Josie's froses noses skint it. Winter's diabolic, ain't it?
It was during his latter, creatively fertile period that he began working on constructions from bibs and bobs, plaster, piping, etc. Mixed media, I think the art world call it. I would call it unmixed magic. One of the ones that he did was called The Hustler, which involved a starling. Bud had a sneaking regard for the stucky or the starling. He regarded it as the spiv of the feathered world. Another piece he did was called The Lament of the Long Winter, or Caught in a Cold Tin Roof. They were complex pieces, really, which involved poems and visual arts. In the 60s, he combined his interest in do-it-yourself and photography in the form of objet trouvé art, which he labelled cameraless photography. He used nuts, bolts, nails, etc., you know, which he positioned on photographic paper, then exposed. He then added balloons with appropriate gag lines. He entitled the series Nut House. Seems incredible now that such a original and brilliant concept should not be snapped up.
Bud made no secret of the fact he was an alcoholic, and at the time I knew he was strictly on orange juice. And he put it to me, he said, I feel if I take one glass, I'll go off the rails completely. So keep off on the rails, one stick to the orange end. It seems to me the great tribute to him, and the Lobey Dosser, and the magnificent statue in Woodlands Road in Glasgow, how ironic it is, and I wonder what Bud would think of it, placed as it is. On one side, across the road, St. Jude's Free Presbyterian Church, and on the other, the Halt and the Arlington, two bars that I don't think we would have been frequenting very much in
That's right.
I love his wee statue, and I think we should campaign to have the statue in George Square instead of up there in that wee dark bit.
A wee dark bit.
Near to that terrible suspect pub where journalists hang out. I think it should be kept well away from journalists.
I think so.
Not only do kids actually get sat on the horse and get photographed, but you know, the graduates at Glasgow University go down there to get their photograph taken. You know, with their full trip, their gowns and their mortarboards and their daft certificates in front of the Lobey Dosser statue.
Well, this is a projection of the El Fideldo idea, the two-legged horse we have, the two-wheeled locomotive.
which really was just by chance. It was the fact that I couldn't be bothered making any more than 2 wheels. I sometimes think that Bud Neill couldn't be bothered running any more than 2 legs. But anyway, it's an O2 old-class locomotive. It's made in the manner of G.I.Bride. You'll have heard of him.
G.I.Bride.
G.I.Bride, all right. I stand corrected. G.I.Bride. And I'm thinking of making a whole fleet of them for maybe one of the new privatised company, El Fideldo class locomotives. Here she goes. Toot toot.
Bud Neill's a Dadaist. That's exactly
I
what
hadn't
he
thought of it.
He's not a surrealist.
He's a Dadaist.
I'm sure that's what it is. We've got it. Dada. Dada Bud.
A few people have said to me, what do you remember about the day your father died? And the thing I always remember actually is the parrot. And it's very, very hard to describe what a parrot in grief looks like. He knew that his great friend had gone. When they're bringing the body downstairs to take it away, he came downstairs and they're taking it through the front corridor, out through the front door, and it's passing the lounge. And I was standing at the lounge as they're passing, and it was extraordinary. As it passed, the parrot said, "Cheerio, cheerio."
Oh, his name is Lobey Dosser. He's a funny-looking dosser with a black hat and beard down to his knees. His name's just like a saucer. His wife is no other tosser. And the sheriff,
It all takes planning. You couldn't get a country into a state like Britain is in accidentally.
Winter's came. The snow has fell. Wee Josie's nose is froze as well.
Wee Josie's
Froze his noses.
Skin tight. Winter's diabolic.
Isn't it?
Caramba. You can tell when it's thawing, when the ice isn't froze.
all the birds have